Good morning, and welcome to the First Existentialist Congregation of Atlanta. We are a philosophically based spiritual community founded on existential philosophy and guided by feminist principles and dedicated to human liberation and the protection of the natural world. My name is Patton White, and I will be facilitating this morning's celebration of life. We make our spiritual home in the old stone church, which was hand-built 100 years ago by the African-American Antioch East Baptist Church. We honor their labors of love and the powerful history of this special place. We acknowledge that our spiritual home stands on land forcibly taken from the Muskogee Creek people. We support justice and equality for all Indigenous people. Our opening words today are a little history lesson, as it were, but also cultural lesson, in honor of the fact that tomorrow, Monday, is Valentine's Day. So, folk traditions of Valentine's Day. While the European folk traditions connected with St. Valentine and St. Valentine's Day have become marginalized by the modern Anglo-American customs connecting the day with romantic love, there are some remaining associations connecting the saint with the advent of spring. While the custom of sending cards, flowers, and chocolates and other gifts originated in the UK, Valentine's Day still remains connected with various regional customs in England. In Norfolk, a character called Jack Valentine knocks on the rear door of houses, leaving sweets and presents for children. Although he was leaving treats, many children were scared of this mystical person. In Slovenia, Saint Valentine, or Zdravko, was one of the saints of spring, the saint of good health, and the patron of beekeepers and pilgrims. A proverb says that Saint Valentine brings the keys of roots. Plants and flowers start to grow on this day. It has been celebrated as the day when the first work in the vineyards and the fields commences. It is also said that birds propose to each other or marry on that day. Another proverb says, Valentine prvi spomladen, or Valentine, the first spring saint. As in some places, especially White Camiola, St. Valentine marks the beginning of spring. Valentine's Day has only recently been celebrated as the Day of Love. The Day of Love was traditionally March 12th, the St. Gregory's Day, or February 22nd, St. Vincent's Day. The patron love was St. Anthony, whose day has been celebrated on June 13th. So, a little alternative Valentine's Day trivia, as it were. This morning we are going to have a song that is grounded in love. What wondrous love is this? And our musicians Mick Kinney, Gene Heinrich, Robert Stewart, and myself, Patton White, will share this song with you now. Please rise in body or spirit as you are willing and able, and join in singing What Wondrous Love Is This? Thank you so much to the musicians for that lovely rendition of that song. Today's speaker is longtime First E member Lisa Cottrell. Lisa is a psychotherapist in private practice, a poet, writer, and activist. She is a longtime member of the First Existentialist congregation. She has been a student of Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh since 1999 and has studied with many other Buddhist teachers. Lisa incorporates feminism, existentialism, mindfulness, compassion, and a social justice perspective in her therapy practice. She also trains therapists how to use mindfulness in their lives and professional practices. Lisa is a co-founder of the Avondale Alliance for Racial Justice and on the leadership team. For info, see aa-rj.org. You can download her CD, Mindful Meditations for Well-Being, for free at www.wellbeingpsychotherapy, that's all one word, .net. Please join me in welcoming Lisa Cottrell.
Hi, I'm happy to be with you here today. This congregation, the First Existentialist Congregation of Atlanta, was founded in 1976, and it was founded on existential and feminist principles. And we've celebrated Susan B. Anthony's birthday for many decades. She was born on February 15, 1820. I want to celebrate her and other activists for equality in the context of both history and the times in which we are living. I'm here today, I hope, to remind you to remember what you know and inspire you to act, to be an activist for inclusion, to make this world a better place that leaves no one out. In this country, activists have worked hard for the rights of many people: women, Black, Indigenous, Asian, Latinx people, and immigrants, lesbian, gay, bi, trans, and gender nonconforming people, poor people, workers, disabled people, and people of all religions and none. We have been working to enlarge the circle to leave no one out. Susan B. Anthony worked tirelessly for women's rights and the right to vote. She was a brave, gender-bending rebel. She viewed restrictive clothing as a method of control, so she cut her hair short and wore loose pants under a dress called bloomers until she decided it distracted from her focus on the right to vote. At the age of 16, she became an abolitionist and handed out anti-slavery petitions, and later became an American Anti-Slavery Society agent. She was part of the Equal Rights Association, which advocated for an amendment for universal suffrage, for allowing the vote for Blacks, whites, men, and women. Not surprisingly, though, there were problems with racism in the women's rights movement and with sexism in the voting rights movement for Black men. There were arguments about who should be enfranchised first, and Susan B. Anthony was a close friend of Frederick Douglass's for many years, and they worked together. However, when the 14th Amendment was passed to abolish slavery, Douglass felt it was more urgent to give Black men the vote, and Susan B. Anthony felt that that was not fair to leave women out. So she tore their friendship apart, however, when she said, quote, "If you will not give the whole loaf of justice to the entire people, it should be given to the most intelligent and capable portion of women first." And then she also used the word Sambo in one of her writings at the time, which Douglass confronted her about. Those in power benefit from this type of prejudice and divisiveness then and now. We need to each learn from each other about the impact of our privilege and how to support one another. As hard as it can be, we need to all move forward arm in arm together and leave no one out. From a progressive viewpoint, these are dangerous times. Every time we make advances toward inclusion, equity, and equality, there's a pushback or backlash. These backlashes are often out of fear of loss by those in power who work up the tribal fears of the other to achieve their aims of pushing back those gains. Racism, sexism, classism, homophobia, transphobia, anti-Semiticism, Islamophobia, and xenophobia are powerful tools of the patriarchy. And we have to keep working to ensure that once a person or group has access to rights and power, they are not again excluded. Political backlash is not new, but these times are more dangerous because there are those in power who are working actively to turn us into a sham democracy led by corporate interests and corrupt politicians. The very rights to vote fought for by Anthony Stanton and Douglass are being threatened once again, as they were during Jim Crow and have been since the weakening of the Civil Rights Act. Republicans are making it harder to vote, and some of them would corrupt the honesty of our elections. Anthony clearly saw and stated that disenfranchisement means inability to make, shape, or control one's circumstances. The disenfranchised must always do the work, accept the wages, occupy the position the enfranchised assigned to them. There are many powerful people who want this country to become an oligarchy, where the few control us all. Some would say we're already there. They often parade as Christian fundamentalists, but what they want is power, influence, and money. They appear to want to conserve and enforce white male supremacy. You know this, you fear this. Some of you aren't sure what to do. Most of us try to do what we feel we can. I ask you, will you regret not doing more if we let Trump and his conspirators get away with their plans? As I said, I'm not here today to depress you, but to inspire you. To inspire you to take action and motivate others to act. Demand our leaders act. I want us to be inspired by activists like Susan B. Anthony, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, Paulie Murphy, Marsha P. Johnson, Judith Heumann, Winona LaDuke, Greta Thunberg, and others. As Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the term intersectional feminism, said, we need to stand in solidarity with one another, question power structures, and speak out against the root causes of inequalities to build a future that leaves no one behind. We need to root out all oppression and build a new normal that is fair to all. Susan B. Anthony was a Quaker. Quakers believed the inner light of God exists in every human and that every soul was equal in the eyes of God. As humanists and Unitarian Universalists and all the other forms of faith that this congregation may encompass, we believe in the inherent dignity and rights of every human. We need to remember that to be brave, that we can be brave and we can make a difference. Susan B. Anthony traveled many miles, gave hundreds of speeches, gathered thousands of signatures on petitions, organized suffragists to press for women's suffrage. She also served as the American Anti-Slavery Society agent, arranging meetings, making speeches, putting up posters, distributing leaflets, and when she encountered hostile mobs, armed threats, and had things thrown at her, she did not quit. She also didn't give up after she was arrested for voting. She didn't even live to see women obtain the vote. I also want to shout out our congregation member, Lorraine Fontana, who's been a longtime activist who's shown up and never gives up, even when she's been arrested for civil disobedience. Lorraine can be one of our role models, along with the other activists amongst us. Another role model is Paulie Murphy. Her perspective was intersectional before the invention of the phrase intersectional feminism. She was a civil rights and women's rights activist, priest, writer, legal scholar, labeler, organizer, and a co-founder of the National Organization for Women. She was multiracial, black woman, who later moved away from the Now leadership because she felt they didn't appropriately address the concerns of black and working class women. When she was in Howard University Law School as the only woman, she coined the term Jane Crow to describe the sexism that black women faced. She wrote and theorized extensively on her experiences of black womanhood, asserting that for her, gender, race, and sexuality could not be separated. The legal and theoretical parallels that she drew between racial discrimination and gender discrimination set the stage for feminist thinkers to follow and helped set the stage for Supreme Court Ruth Bader Ginsburg's landmark legal works on the rights of women. And she also, Paulie's work, led to the inclusion of sex-based discrimination under the Equal Protection Clause. Murphy was the first African-American woman to be ordained as an Episcopal priest, and Paulie Murphy had a longtime female partner but did not describe herself as lesbian. She privately reported feeling like a man trapped in a woman's body and attempted to get hormone therapy, which she was denied. Today, she would likely consider herself trans. Paulie Murphy and Susan B. Anthony are both role models for working tirelessly to change how people think and to change the law. Paulie Murphy actually also said, "One person and a typewriter is a movement." So I know we have some writers in the crowd, and I know you try to do your part. Another inspiring activist is Judith Heumann. You might have seen her in the wonderful documentary Crip Camp. She was a disability rights, and still is, a disability rights activist. She had polio as a child and became paraplegic and had to use a wheelchair. And at the time, the disabled were generally kept home or in the institutions. So she and her family had to fight for her to even be able to go to public school. And they organized with other families to even be able to get her to go to school. Because originally they said, "Oh no, you can't come." And they sent a teacher to her home for an hour and a half a week, as if that was education. So she began to organize for disability rights herself. Her parents did before her in college, organizing and petitioning for her right to live in a dorm and have ramps for access, and then later for her right to teach as a teacher in elementary school. The school board said, how would she get the children out if there was an emergency? And that was the reason they denied her teaching license. So she sued and won her right to teach. Then in 1970, she and several of her friends founded Disabled in Action, an organization that used political protests to obtain civil rights. She organized a sit-in of 50 disabled people that shut down Madison Avenue in New York City. She later helped develop and pass the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act so that disabled people could be guaranteed to obtain public education tailored to their needs. Think of how many people that has helped. Later, she led a historic, harrowing 28-day sit-in of people with disabilities in the San Francisco office of the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. They were protesting because Nixon and other presidents kept vetoing the section of the act that stated no qualified person with a disability shall be excluded from any government-funded program. They did get that passed. And then in 1990, over 1,000 people marched from the White House to the Capitol to demand that Congress pass the Americans with Disabilities Act. And when they got there, about 60 of the protesters cast aside their wheelchairs and other mobility aids and crawled up the Capitol steps, showing how architecture served as barriers. And after the empathy generated by that image, and I hope a little shame on Congress, the ADA was passed. I want to remind all of us that life is fragile. It's likely just a matter of time until even the most currently able among us become less able. Most of us have already lost some of our former abilities. Let us leave no one out. We're also living in a time of great sickness. The world has been rocked by a great pandemic for the last 2 years, and almost 6 million lives have been lost to COVID. This is but the latest symptom of an earth that is sick. We are destroying the very ecosystems upon which we humans and so many plants and animals depend. We're in the midst of a great mass extinction of plants and animals caused by human overpopulation, encroachment, and eradication of wilderness, and the burning of fossil fuels that has caused global warming and climate instability. As the young, brilliant, autistic climate activist Greta Thunberg has warned, we need to wake up to the fact that our house is on fire and act urgently to deal with the crisis and to prevent it from becoming worse. The greed and denial of the fossil fuel industry continues to endanger us all. The core cause of this problem is humans in wrong relation with this great Mother Earth and Father Sky on which we are completely dependent. We are also in wrong relation with our sisters, brothers, and two-spirit friends when we exploit them and do not see we are all interconnected and related. We need each other. We don't just need other humans, but we need animals, plants, the climate, and our earth who support us all. We need to not just focus on our country, but other nations and the world as a whole, especially those who are suffering because of our excessive overconsumption. Indigenous people are calling out the world to listen to the ancestral wisdom of viewing our interconnection with nature as sacred. The white colonizer mindset has been one of domination of nature and of other peoples. People of other traditions, including my dear teacher Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh, have spoke out on the urgency of changing our relationship to the earth and to each other for a human future to be possible. Ojibwe indigenous rights and environmental activist Winona LaDuke, who also has some Russian Jewish ancestry, says, "As I reflect on the question of how to be a good ancestor, I reflect on intergenerational accountability. How do I account for my behaviors and decisions to my ancestors and my descendants?" In response, LaDuke, a Harvard graduate, works tirelessly on issues connected to climate change, human rights, green economies, clean water, local foods, and renewable energy. She founded White Earth Land Recovery Project to recover land for her people and preserve their culture. She helped form the Indigenous Women's Network and worked with women of all red nations to publicize American forced sterilization of Native American women. She's the executive director of Honor the Earth, and a Native environmental advocacy organization that played a very active role in the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. And she's also run for vice president twice on the Green Party with Ralph Nader. And she does all of this while still running her hemp and heritage farm. Now, I know not all of us have that much energy or time, but when we are strongly moved, we can often find time and energy. We can't leave Indigenous people out. We can't leave other nations out. We can't leave animals, plants, water, earth, or air out. We have to cherish this planet and lead each other toward a real planetary healing and justice for us all. My partner Carol and I have been longtime activists, but in 2020 we were moved to do even more. Even during COVID, when we had been sheltering at home, Carol and I were so upset by the murders of Black people that year by police and civilians that we hosted a socially distant and masked protest in support of Black lives. We then organized and created a local organization, the Avondale Alliance for Racial Justice. AARJ works to end white supremacy and to promote equity, inclusion, and diversity through activism, education, community building, and accountability. We have protested and petitioned to demand changes to local policing, held educational events on racism and anti-racism, registered voters, hosted events celebrating Black history, Latinx cultures. We'll be hosting our second annual Black History Month student art contest soon, and then a Juneteenth concert this summer, which will be our third one. We have found it really joyful to network with other activists and to see the joy our work can bring. Many a Black driver has thanked us during our Black Lives Matter protests. We have learned more about the suffering of others and try to bring that voices to people in power. Taking action combats helplessness and hopelessness and gives a sense of contribution and meaning. I now want to spend more time working on activism around environmental rights because I think it's essential, and I have to figure out how to do that while being a psychotherapist and still a leader of the Avondale Alliance for Racial Justice. I know a lot of you already vote, make phone calls, send postcards and emails, and attend protests. What else can you do? How else can you step up while staying grounded in the activities that feed your soul? When our hearts and minds are called, we need to act. I urge you to join in and leave no one out. Help protect all people and all life on this planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing your thoughts and ideas with us this morning. Please join us on Zoom immediately following today's broadcast for our meet and greet, where we will discuss the ideas and topics that Lisa shared today, as well as sharing personal joys, sorrows, and concerns, and community announcements. You can find the link to the link to the Zoom meeting in the chat section of today's broadcast. Next week, we will be welcoming back Paula Lark with her talk, I See Colored People. So please join us immediately on Zoom after this or next Sunday at 11 a.m. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day today, this weekend, and a wonderful coming week ahead. Bye-bye.